It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Mark Lawson, who is the GameDay Tourist Sports podcast. How are you doing today?
I am very well. Thank you, Brandon. Thanks for having me on. I don't often get to be a guest on other people's podcasts, so thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you got started with your Sports Talk podcast?
Yes. So I actually started GameDay Tourist as an Instagram page, and it was designed to document my sports travels as I went to different places, particularly around Europe and North America, the US. But I soon found that that was very difficult to keep up with new content because it needed a lot of traveling from my side. So I had listened to a lot of podcasts anyway, and I was really inspired by some such as the Bros Talking Soccer podcast. There was one called the Fitcast, and I really liked how they got to talk about things they loved and also talk to really interesting people as well. And I was trying to figure out how I could marry that with sports travel. And there was another podcast called The Amateur Traveler, which focuses on a different destination every week. So I kind of combined all of them to get my podcast together. And now I can talk about traveling without needing to spend lots of money and time traveling myself.
Can you talk about how you came up with the name for your podcast, the GameDay Tourist?
Yes. So when I first started my Instagram page, I wanted to make sure that I had a name that I could use on Instagram, Twitter, and also for a website. And I also knew that I wanted this to marry sports with travel. So I went through a few different names, such as the Sports Tourist, Stadium Traveler. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the Instagram account, the Twitter account, and the website for all of those. But eventually I found GameDay Tourist. All of those were available, and that's the name that has stuck for nearly 3 years now.
Can you talk about what you cover in the GameDay Tourist?
Absolutely. So, GameDay Tourist is a sports travel and culture podcast. So, we have various different episode types. One of the main ones is a destination guide. I just posted one yesterday on the San Francisco Bay Area. We've covered places like Dublin, Ireland, Sydney, Australia, obviously Chicago, many different areas. And we take a look at not only the sports that are available for people to go and see in those cities, but also other things they can go and do in the destination so they can make a bit of a vacation out of it. We also do episode types I call Tales from the Road, where we have some really great guests who have traveled all over the world to watch different sports and they share their stories. And then some of my favorite episodes, we do sports overviews and country overviews. So for the countries, we've done Japan, which is really interesting because they have a very different culture. They love baseball there. Obviously, sumo wrestling is a big sport. And we've done lots of different sports overviews, such as rugby, kabaddi, which is a really interesting sport that's huge in India, but not necessarily known in other places in the world, and things in the US as well, like lacrosse, that do have a big following, but are not as mainstream as the big four sports.
Can you talk about some of the stadiums and the college football that you have covered?
Yes. So unfortunately, I have only been to see one live college football game. So that was at Spartan Stadium, home of the Michigan State Spartans in East Lansing, Michigan. And that's actually where my wife is from. So we spent a lot of time there. So I had the opportunity to go. It was a very interesting experience. It was very different to the European football or soccer that I'm used to. I obviously would like to go to many, many more college games, but being so far away from America, if people can't tell by my accent, I am British. I live in England. So coming to America involves long flights for me. But eventually, I would like to go and see Kyle Field for Texas A&M and see what the atmosphere is like there. I'd really like to go down to Tiger Stadium or Death Valley at LSU especially under a night game. That looks like it's an incredible experience. And also, staying in Michigan, I'd like to go to the big house as well. I've never been to a stadium that big or watched a game with that many people. So I think that would be a really interesting experience that I need to get to one day.
Can you talk about, have you ever been to any NFL stadiums to cover them?
I have, again, not as many as I would like. I have probably seen nearly as many NFL games in London at Wembley and the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as I have in the States at NFL stadiums. A few that I've been to, I've seen the Jets at Meadowlands, I've seen the Broncos in Denver, and of course, I've seen the Lions in Detroit. And I think Ford Field, home of the Lions, would be the favorite NFL stadium that I have been to. It's very unlike any other stadium I've seen. I really like the design of it, the brickwork on the outside. It's built into an old warehouse, which makes it really interesting. And they keep that warehouse theme throughout the whole stadium. So it's very different from many other places. And I think it's a really interesting place to go and watch American football.
That's pretty cool. I've never been to that stadium. Can you talk about what is your favorite stadium in the professional stadiums to see?
Yes. So I have a few, and maybe not necessarily my favorites to start off with, but I'll tell you a couple that are really interesting. And if people have the chance, go and see them. In Europe, one is the Rhein-Energie Stadium in Cologne. That's home to FC Cologne of the Bundesliga. And the fans there are just fantastic. It's a really great atmosphere. I think in general, German football has really, really good fans and generates great atmospheres at its games. Another place I would highly recommend is the Bernabeu Stadium in Madrid, home of Real Madrid. It's one of the world's most famous stadiums, and there's very good reason for that. When you sit there, and I had seats right at the top, right at the back, but it's a huge stadium, especially by European football, soccer standards. And it is really breathtaking. And of course, you are watching one of the world's most famous teams as well. So it's a special experience. But my absolute favorite, and I'm going to be quite biased here, it's my team. So I am a Tottenham Hotspur fan. I have season tickets. And about 1.5, nearly 2 years ago, we opened a new stadium. And it's a really, really wonderful stadium. It's unlike anything I've ever seen in Europe for a football or soccer stadium. It's much closer to what you would expect an American stadium to be. There's lots of interesting design features. There's lots of things to see and do. There's great food and drink, which if anybody has been to some of the older Premier League football stadiums, they will know that that's not always necessarily the case. And wherever you sit in this stadium, you have a great view. And of course, if the team is winning, it makes it that much better.
That's amazing. What are some of your future plans with the GameDay Tourist?
So I would quite like, first of all, to get a little bit more consistent with the podcast. At the moment, I'm not putting out as many episodes as I would like. I would like to get them out on a regular basis as well. At the moment, they're a little bit ad hoc. And of course, the more episodes I record, the more interesting people I get to talk to. But also in future, I'd quite like to be doing some more written content, not necessarily written by myself. I don't enjoy writing. I enjoy doing things like this and talking to people. So I would be interested in having other people write for the website and share their travel experiences or write about specific stadiums or sports culture around the world. So we could build that side of things, because not everybody likes listening to podcasts. Some people really like to read articles on different things. So I think that's where I will be focusing my attention on GameDay Tourist for a little while.
What are some of the future stadiums that you plan on visiting for the GameDay Tourist?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't have any plans at the moment. Here in the UK, we are currently in a lockdown. So there are no fans allowed at any sports at all. traveling overseas is quite difficult. Sorry, there are very strict rules on needing to self-isolate when you return from most countries in the world now. But there are a lot I would like to get to see. And when I told you about my favorite stadium in Detroit, I didn't get a chance to tell you about the ones I would really like to see. But US Bank Stadium in Minnesota looks like a beautiful stadium, fantastically designed. And I would really like to see a game there sometime. The same with Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. That looks beautiful. And that roof, the way it spins and opens, is really, really interesting. And I hear the atmosphere is absolutely wonderful there. So I'd like to experience that. And I always hear great things about CenturyLink Field in Seattle, home of the Seahawks. I hear that their fans are some of the loudest around. And those views of downtown are absolutely spectacular from what I see in photographs. So I'd like to check that out for myself. But if I'm honest, Brandon, I'd like to go pretty much everywhere. I have trouble reducing it to a small list.
Have you also covered any NBA or Major League baseball stadiums?
I have. So I've been to a few games. The first Major League ballpark I ever went to was in Baltimore, Camden Yards, home of the Orioles. Of course, I have seen the Tigers play in Detroit, and that's what, for me, makes Detroit a really great sports destination. That you have Ford Field, home of the Lions, right next to Comerica Park, home of the Tigers, and just down the road, you have Little Caesars Arena, where you find the Pistons and the Red Wings. Beyond that, I don't think I've been to many other baseball stadiums. I've watched basketball in a few places. I've seen the Bulls in Chicago, which was a fun experience. I've seen hockey in a few different places as well. So I don't necessarily go to cover these places for the podcast, but I'm just a fan of traveling and seeing the different arenas and stadiums. So I like to do that.
Have you traveled to, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers or like Carolina Panthers or Charlotte Hornets nearby me?
I have not, unfortunately. I've not spent much time in your area of the world at all. I think the closest I have been is mid Florida. I haven't actually seen any games in Florida, but I've seen a few of the stadiums. Maybe one day I will have the chance to get to your area of the world and see some games in those stadiums. Like I say, I would like to see all of them at some point. So it's definitely on my list of things to do.
That's wonderful. What advice would you give upcoming future sports talk podcasts that are looking to get into traveling to see stadiums?
So I would suggest that maybe I'm not the best person to give advice on this. I don't travel anywhere near as much as the guests I have on my show. I'm very fortunate that I get to do it as a hobby and get to talk about it as well. But these people are traveling lots throughout the year, maybe every weekend, and getting to see lots of different places. So my first piece of advice would be to listen to the GameDay Tourist podcast and listen to some of the guests I've had there, because I actually asked this same question to them as well. So Brett, who was on one of your episodes not so long ago, he's a great sports traveler and he was a great guest of mine. Paul Baker, Tom Thrash, was a recent guest of mine, and Sean McDonald as well. These people have been to hundreds of different stadiums. So I'd recommend going to listening to the episodes and following those people on Twitter and Instagram as well to see what they're up to. But personally, for me, I would say use the trips that you already have. So if you are on a vacation somewhere and there is a sports team in the area, say, I don't know, say I went on vacation to Denver for a weekend on a trip across America, and I got to go and see the Broncos play, and I also got to see the Nuggets play at the same time. All of that I was only in town for maybe 3 days. So you can fit a lot of things in, but do it at your own pace. If you're not comfortable traveling lots and lots and lots to see these games, you don't have to do it all at once. Take your time. Just go and visit somewhere. Enjoy what you're doing there as well. See some of the city. Don't just go in, see the game, come away. I think you'll enjoy it much more at a slower pace. And yeah, just if there's somewhere you want to go, just do it. Get on a flight. You can get to most places pretty easily. So take the opportunity while it's there. And if you enjoy it, find somewhere else and go there.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find the Game Day Tourist at on social media along with podcast platforms?
So the Game Day Tourist podcast is on most major podcast platforms, particularly the big ones like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio. You can find me on social media on Twitter and Instagram, both as @GameDayTourist. And all my podcasts, are posted on my website, which is GameDayTourist.com.
Thank you again, Mark, for your interview, and best of luck in the Game Day Tourist business.
Thanks, Brandon.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Mark, for your interview, and best of luck in the Game Day Tourist business.
Thanks for having me.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.